There's an old Jewish joke, maybe you've heard it before. It's Yom Kippur morning, and the rabbi is standing in front of the open ark, beating their chest, crying out, I'm nothing, I am but dust and ashes. The Cantor, then, not to be outdone, comes up beside them and starts beating their chest, maybe embellishing in the nusach and the melody, I am nothing, I am but dust and ashes. And then Saul Rosenberg, who sits in the front row every Shabbos, throws himself onto the floor, starts openly weeping and wailing and banging his chest louder than anyone, I am nothing, I am but dust and ashes. The rabbi then turns to the Cantor and says, look who thinks he's nothing. Whether you're the one who sits in the front row or the back row or the rabbi or the Cantor, humility, anava, is a spiritual quality that is challenging to know how to talk about and even more challenging to cultivate sometimes. But our tradition through Torah and rabbinic teachings implores us many, many times to guard against haughtiness. This week's Parshat, Ekev, offers a powerful moment to reflect on this very challenge. Moshe, who the Torah will later tell us was the most humble person ever to live, he continues his farewell address to Bnei Israel that really comprises this entire final book of the Torah, this book of Dvarim, as the people prepare to enter the promised land, and he speaks with urgency and in God's voice, saying, when you have eaten your fill and built fine houses to live in, and your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold have increased, and everything you own has prospered, beware lest your heart grow haughty, and you forget your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your ancestors had never known. And you say to yourself, my own power and the might of my own hand have won this wealth for me? Remember that it is God who gives you the power to achieve this wealth. These words strike at the heart of the human experience. It's easy to attribute our successes to our own efforts, forgetting the visible or perhaps concealed support that made it possible. And maybe I've just been watching too much of the DNC this week, but I'm reminded of Senator Elizabeth Warren's words during her 2012 presidential campaign. She said, there's nobody in this country who got rich on their own. Nobody. You built a factory out there, good for you. But to be clear, you moved your goods to market on the roads the rest of us paid for. You hired workers the rest of us paid to educate. You were safe in your factory because of police forces and fire forces the rest of us paid for. Her words remind us that we cannot really ever claim sole credit for our accomplishments. And our Parshat invites us to go deeper, looking beyond ourselves to recognize the source of all as truly the source of all, and all we have received. It calls us to guard against the inclination to elevate ourselves, and to see our place in the universe with humility, and acknowledging the divine as the ultimate source of all opportunity. But even with this awareness, the temptation to take full credit for our achievements is strong. Throughout the Tanakh, we find individuals who fell because they could not accept that their success was not theirs alone. In fact, in Midrash Tanchuma, the rabbis recount the downfall of figures like Bilam and Solomon, Goliath and Korach, all undone because they could not accept that their success might be a product of efforts above their own. And so we know that we must cultivate humility on multiple levels. In our spiritual lives, in our personal relationships, our professional endeavors. The Baal Shem Tov was once asked, why when the Torah repeatedly warns against pride and extols humility, is the cultivation of humility itself, the act of being humble, why is that itself not a mitzvah? Why isn't that not one of the 613 commandments? He answered that if humility were a mitzvah, our egos would proudly claim it among our accomplishments. And therein lies the paradox, of course, with humility. The very act of striving for it, let alone achieving it, can lead to pride. Yet despite this paradox, humility remains a central value in our tradition. As I mentioned, the Torah tells us that Moshe was the most humble person ever to live. The Talmud teaches that God chose to reveal God's self at the burning bush because it was the simplest, most basic form of plant life. And that Mount Sinai was chosen as the site of revelation because it was the lowliest mountain in the region. And if we turn to Musar, the study of Jewish moral and ethical living, we learn that real humility in a Jewish context is not about making oneself less than what one is, but by occupying the space that is rightfully ours. As Diana Ginsburg teaches, Moshe may have been the humblest ever to live, but he still stood up to the most powerful human force of his time and led his people out of Egypt. The bush in the wilderness may have been the simplest form of vegetation, but it was hardy enough to withstand fire. Sinai might have been the lowliest of mountains, but it was still a mountain. It wasn't a crater. The Jewish understanding of humility tells us that we shouldn't shrink ourselves, but we should cultivate awareness and then take up the space that is rightfully ours. No more, no less. And then that, in turn, allows others to do the same. This is the humility we must cultivate, not just as individuals, but as a collective, and particularly now at this moment in Jewish time. In a week and a half, we will mark Rosh Chodesh Elul, the beginning of the month of Elul, a time of spiritual preparation for the Yamim Noraim, a time of Cheshbon HaNefesh and Teshuvah. And our tradition teaches that this work requires a humble heart. As the Rambam notes in Hilchot Teshuvah, the first step in this process is Hakarat HaChet, recognizing the ways that we have fallen short and missed the mark. But how can we possibly accept critique from others and engage in introspection if we're not coming from a place of humility? Surely the critique itself may be humbling, but without entering into it with a humble heart, how unlikely might we be to truly hear the critique in the first place? Without coming from a place of humility, how likely might we be to dismiss it out of hand because of who it comes from? Or our ego, our own sense of self, or what it might mean about our core identity. If teshuvah is meant as the spiritual preparation for the Yamim Noraim, then surely the cultivation of humility must be the preparation for teshuvah itself. So as we prepare to enter Elul, let us use this time to lean into the practice of cultivating humility, to assess how we might have stepped beyond our rightful space or allowed ourselves to shrink in moments of challenge. And let us not stop there. Let us take this humility and turn it into action, into the work of transformation. As we approach the high holy days, may we be guided by this humility to repair our relationships, to seek forgiveness when it's needed, and to extend forgiveness when it's asked. And may we enter the new year ready to become the fullest, most authentic versions of ourselves. No more and no less. Shabbat Shalom.